Chapter 3 of The Giver. "Oh, look!" Lily squealed in delight. "Isn't he cute? Look how tiny he is. And he has funny eyes like yours, Jonas." Jonas glared at her. He didn't like that she had mentioned his eyes. He waited for his father to chastise Lily, but father was busy unstrapping the carrying basket from the back of his bicycle. Jonas walked over to look. It was the first thing Jonas noticed as he looked at the new child peering up curiously from the basket. The pale eyes. Almost every citizen in the community had dark eyes. His parents did, Lily did, and so did all the group members and friends. But there was a few exceptions. Jonas himself and a female 5 who had noticed had different, lighter eyes. No one ever mentioned such things because it was not because it was rude, but it was considered rude to call attention to things that were unsettling or different about individuals. Lily, he decided, would have to learn that soon, or she would be called in for chastisement because of her insensitive chatter. Father put his bike into the port. Then he picked up the basket and carried it to the house. Lily followed behind, but she glanced back over her shoulder at Jonas and teased, "Maybe he had the same birth mother as you?" Jonas shrugged. He followed them inside, but he had been startled by the new child's eyes. Mirrors were rare in the community. They weren't forbidden, but there was no real need for a mirror. And Jonas had simply never bothered to look at himself very often when he found himself in a location where mirrors did exist. Now, seeing the new child and its expression, he was reminded that the light eyes were not only a rarity, but gave the one who had them a certain look. What was that look? Depth, he decided, as one were looking into the clear water of the river, down to the bottom where things might lurk, where they haven't been discovered yet. He felt self-conscious, realizing that he, too, had that look. He went to his desk, pretending not to be interested in the new child. On the other side of the room, Mother and Lily were bending over to watch as Father unwrapped its blanket. "What's this comfort object called?" Lily asked, picking up a stuffed creature which had been placed in the new child's basket. Father glanced at it. "It's called a hippo," he said. Lily giggled at the strange word. "Hippo?" she repeated, and put the comfort object down again, and she peered at the unwrapped new child who waved his arms. "I think new children are so cute. I hope I get assigned to be a birth mother." "Lily, don't even say that," Mother spoke sharply. "There's very little honor in that assignment." "But I was talking to Natasha, you know, the 10 who lives around the corner. She does some of her volunteer hours at the birthing center, and she told me that birth mothers get wonderful food, they have gentle exercise periods, and most of the time they play games and amuse themselves while they're waiting. I think I like that a lot," said Lily petulantly. 3 years, that's it. 3 births, and that's all. And after that, they're laborers for the rest of their adult lives until the day that they're in the house of old. Is that what you want, Lily? 3 lazy years and then hard physical labors until you're old?" "Well, no, I guess not," Lily acknowledged reluctantly. Father turned the new child onto his tummy in the basket. He sat beside and rubbed the small back with rhythmic motion. "Anyway, Lily Billy," he said affectionately, "the birth mothers never even get to see new children. If you enjoy little ones so much, you should hope for the job as a nurturer like me. When you're an 8 and start your volunteer hours, you could try out at the nurturing center," Mother suggested. "Yeah, I think I will," Lily said, and she knelt beside the basket. "What did you say his name was? Gabriel? Hello, Gabriel," she said in a sing-song voice. Then she giggled. "Oops," she said, "I think he's asleep. I guess I better be quiet." Jonas turned the school assignment on his desk. Some chance of that, he thought. Lily was never quiet. Probably she would hope for an assignment to be speaker so that she could just sit in an office with a microphone all day making announcements. He laughed silently to himself at that, picturing his sister droning on in self-important voice that all speakers seemed to develop, saying things like, "Attention, this is a reminder to females under 9 that hair ribbons are neatly tied at all times." He turned towards Lily and noticed with satisfaction that her ribbons were, as usual, undone and dangling. There would be an announcement like that very soon, and he felt certain it would be directed mainly at Lily, though her name, of course, would not be mentioned. But everyone would know it was her. Everyone had known, he remembered with humiliation, that time when the announcement said, "Attention, this is a reminder to male 11s that objects are not to be removed from the recreation area, and snacks are to be eaten, not hoarded." It had been specifically directed at him, everyone knew that, the day that last month when he had taken the apple home. No one ever mentioned it, not even his parents, because the public announcement had been sufficient to produce the appropriate remorse. He had, of course, disposed of the apple and made his apology to the recreation director the morning after before school. Jonas thought again about that incident. He was still bewildered by it. Not by the announcement or the necessary apology, those were standard procedure. and he had deserved then. But by the incident itself, he probably should have brought up his feelings of bewilderment that very evening when the family unit had shared their feelings of the day. But he had not been able to sort out and put words to the source of his confusion, so he just let it pass. See, it happened during the recreation period when he had been playing with Asher. Jonas had casually picked up an apple from the basket where the stacks were kept, and he kept throwing it to his friend. Asher threw it back, and they had begun a simple game of catch. Then there had been something special about it. There had been nothing special about it. It was an activity that he had performed countless times. Throw, catch, throw, catch. It was effortless for Jonas, and even boring. Although Asher enjoyed it, and playing catch was a required activity for Asher because it would improve his hand-eye coordination, which was not up to standards. But suddenly, Jonas had noticed, following the path of the apple through the air with his eyes, that the piece of fruit, well, this was part that he couldn't quite adequately understand. The apple had changed. Just for an instant, changed in midair, he remembered. Then it was in his hand, and he looked at it carefully, but it was the same apple, unchanged. The same size, the same shape, a perfect spear. The same undescript shade, about the same shade as his own tunic. There was absolutely nothing remarkable about the apple. He tossed it back and forth between his hands a few times, and then again to Asher, and again in the air for only an instant. It changed. It happened 4 times. Jonas blinked, looked around, and then tested his eyesight, squinting at the small print of the identification badge attached to its tunic. He read the name quite clearly. He could also clearly see that Asher on the other end of the throwing area, and he had no problem catching the apple. Jonas had been completely mystified. Ash, does something look strange to you about this apple? Yeah, it jumps out of her hand and onto the ground. Asher just dropped it once again. So Jonas laughed too. With his laughter, he tried to ignore the uneasy conviction that something had changed. But he had taken the apple home against the recreation area rules. That evening, before his parents and Lily arrived at the dwelling, he held it with his hands and looked at it carefully. It was slightly bruised now because Asher had dropped it several times. But there was nothing at all unusual about this apple. He held a magnifying glass to it. He even tossed it several times in the air, watching, and he watched it roll around and onto his desktop, waiting for that thing to happen again. But it hadn't. The only thing that happened was an announcement later that evening on the speaker, the announcement that had singled him out without using his name, and it caused both his parents to glance meaningfully at the desk where the apple still lay. Now sitting at his desk, staring at his schoolwork as his family hovered over the new child in his basket, he shook his head, trying to forget this odd incident. He forced himself to arrange his papers and try to study a little harder before the evening meal. The new child, Gabriel, stirred and whimpered, and Father spoke softly to Lily, explaining the feeding procedure as he opened the container and held the formula and equipment. The evening proceeded as all evenings did in the family unit, in the dwelling, in the community. It was quiet, reflective, a time for renewal and preparation for the day to come. It was different only in the addition to the new child with his pale, solemn, knowing eyes. And that's chapter 3.